Hello, AP Worlders. Welcome to part 2 of the Classical Civilizations lecture. And we are starting with China. Alright, and so China had the advantage of not having to create something new, but restoring a previous empire. Alright, so the previous places like Greece, Rome, Persia, they had to create new empires. But China, they just had to restore what was built during the foundations era. So China was in the era of warring states after the Zhou dynasty, which was here, ruled at the very beginning of the classical era. And so after they lost power, it was that era of warring states where they were fighting, all right? And that's when we got those belief systems of Confucianism, Taoism, and legalism trying to stabilize the country, all right? And so then the Qin dynasty would gain control of the state under legalism, all right? And they're going to establish the state of the Qin dynasty. And they did show some advancements, and they would lay the foundation for a unified Chinese state. All right, hundreds of thousands of people would be recruited to construct the Great Wall, which was going to be designed to keep barbarians from the north. All right, so here you can see the Great Wall being built during this Qin dynasty. They also made a uniform system of weights, measures, and currency, and they organized the written form of the Chinese language. But the speed and brutality of the Qin dynasty, because of legalism, led to their collapse. And the Han dynasty, which you can see here, which is going to be larger, is going to rule for the rest of the classical era. And as you can see from the map, they're going to extend the Great Wall even further during their rule. The Han dynasty would last for over 400 years, and they would expand the Chinese territory, pushing into current-day Korea and Central Asia. One archaeological find of note during the Qin dynasty are going to be these terracotta army soldiers that are going to be discovered. All right, they were discovered in 1974 by a group of farmers. All right, and these sculptures, they were depicting the armies of the Qin dynasty, the first emperor of China, and their purpose was to protect the emperor in his afterlife. Now we're going to move our attention to India. During the first civilization, during that foundation era, the India civilization was found along the Indus River, and it was the most impressive during the foundations era. But during the classical era, India is going to play a less prominent role. Classical India would move to a new river, which is the Ganges River. And the Aryans in the Indo-European group, Indo-European group would settle the area. The civilization was a collection of towns and cities with a range of different ethnic, cultural, and linguistic diversity. What gave them a commonality, or what's going to unite them, is the religion of Hinduism. All right, but the political fragmentation and cultural diversity would affect South Asia all the way up to modern times. And it would be a sharp contrast to China, where China had a cultural and political unity. Persian and Greek influence would stimulate the first of India's empires during the classical era, which is the Mauryan Empire. And it's going to encompass all but the southern tip of South Asia. They had a civilian bureaucracy, and they taxed the trade. They taxed trade, herds of animals, and land. The government operated many industries, including spinning, weaving, mining, and shipbuilding. All right. Ashoka is going to be their best known emperor. And the reason why we know about Ashoka is because he left record details of his activities and his thinking in a series of edicts that were going to be carved into rocks. All right, one thing of note for Ashoka is he's going to convert to actually Buddhism, right, which goes against the traditional Hinduism religion that was there in India. All right, but soon after Ashoka's death, the empire would collapse and a second empire would grow, which is the Gupta. All right, and the Gupta was a general peaceful empire, and they were tolerant and tolerant of other groups, and they were prosperous. And they had free hospitals, but they had a strict hierarchy system, that caste system that we know of in India. And the untouchables would be the bottom of the caste system, and they would have to wear bells to warn people of their presence. The Gupta, they flourished in art, literature, temple building, science, math, and medicine. Indian trade with China also thrived during this time period, and evidence of their trade reached even to Rome. However, due to India's unparalleled cultural diversity, they were never able to fully unite. But the religion and caste system created during this time would leave a lasting effect into India today. The caste system, along with Hinduism, would create a shared culture, which would be a substitute for not having a powerful state, because the Gupta and the Mauryan were never a powerful state, unlike Han China and Rome. Although there were other groups in Africa during this time period, one group of note that I would like to discuss is the Aksum Empire or dynasty, which is going to lay here, which is in present day like Ethiopia area. And this was an agricultural society, and it was also the largest port in East Africa at the time. All right, and many sought the products of the interior Africa, such as hides, ivory, and slaves. So the Aksum people would come into the interior Africa, bring those goods out here to the port, and they would trade them with the Middle East and Asia. And they would make money off of taxing these items of trade. The capital city was known for its arts and monuments. Some of these monuments were up to 100 feet tall. And through its trade in the Red Sea here, in Egypt, the Roman world would introduce Christianity to them. All right, so through this trade here, and as you guys know, the Roman Empire took around this area. So through working and trading with them, Christianity would spread there. And they would adopt a new religion about the same time that Constantine adopted the religion for Rome. Today, almost 60% of the people that live in this area still follow Christianity. The other people of note in Africa are the Bantu people. All right, the Bantu people were a pastoral people. Well, pastoral and agricultural people. But they would move and spread throughout Africa over time. All right, so you see the red was like the first kind of movements of the Bantu. And then these are later migrations of the Bantu people. And they originate in current day Nigeria area up here. And there are some 400 distinct but closely related languages that's going to emerge that are collectively going to be known as the Bantu. All right, they were agricultural people with advanced iron working. And that iron is what's going to help them to spread and migrate over there. But this migration is going to be slow and over time. Often what would happen was people would move further downriver in search of new farmlands and leave their previous groups. They would impact the once hunter and gatherer people of Africa once they encountered them. They would disseminate this iron technology as well as agriculture throughout Africa. They would have an advantage over these hunters and gatherers groups due to the amount of people they had, as well as immunity to the diseases and then the iron tools and weapons that they brought with them. So the hunter and the gatherer groups would be either displaced or absorbed into these Bantu groups. But the biggest legacy left by these Bantu people would be the over 400 different languages that derive from them. In Mesoamerica, we're going to have two centers. In the Americas, we'll have two centers. We'll have Mesoamerica and the Andes. All right. Similar to Greece, the geography of the area would lead to the development of many distinct and competing cities, chiefdoms, and states. The remarkable achievements of these early American civilizations and cultures occurred without the many large domesticated animals and ironworking technologies that Afro-Eurasia had. Maya Mesoamerica, a number of urban centers with monumental architects such as, the first group is the Mayans, who were in Mesoamerica. And they're going to have a number of urban centers with monumental architecture, such as pyramids, temples. They developed a math system that included the concept of zero, and they even plotted the cycle of the planets and made a calendar. They also had the most elaborate writing system in the Americas. The Mayans would drain swamps to farm, and they also would farm on the side of hills, making terraces. And they had an elaborate water management system. So here's the Mayans, and not too far from the Mayans was the great city. Alright, so this large city of Teotihuacan was the largest urban complex in the Americas at the time. Much is unknown of them, even their original name, language, and government. But physically, the city was enormous, with avenues. They had spacious plazas, huge markets, temples, palaces, reservoirs, drainage system, and murals. Streets were laid out in grids, and they extracted tribute from the surrounding areas. And at least one Mayan city was taken over by them. And then the last group, the Moche people, which are going to be located here in South America, where the Andes people were, the Chavín were, they're going to replace the Chavín in these Andes mountains. And they had a 250-mile stretch in current-day Peru. They had a complex irrigation system. They were ruled by a warrior priest and some who lived atop huge pyramids. They often held sacrifices of humans who were prisoners of war. Their world was one of war, ceremony, and diplomacy. But they had an absence of written texts. But they did have advanced metalworkers, potters, weavers, and painters. All right, so that's it for our classical civilizations. See you in class.